Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform is making it easier than ever to support Black-owned brands. When you go to walmart.com/Black and Unlimited, you'll not only get to shop products from Black-owned brands, but also learn about founders like Janelle Stevens of Camille Rose, which specializes in products for naturally curly hair. And there are many more awesome products that you have yet to discover. It's all easy to find with Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform. Join in on celebrating Black brands today and every day at Walmart. We are Black and Unlimited. Visit walmart.com/Black and Unlimited to discover more. That's walmart.com/Black and Unlimited.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Jack Rico, and you're listening to Episode 8 of Highly Relevant with Jack Rico. This is the podcast where I interview the people and discuss the moments that are shaping our American and Latino pop culture. On this episode, I welcome one of the quintessential New York Latino character actors in Hollywood, David Zayas. We converse about his new movie, The Lennon Report, his lack of desire to be the star in his own movies, and which stories he thinks Latinos should be writing about for Hollywood. Also, the New York Film Festival begins this weekend, and I spoke to Kent Jones, the director of the festival himself, to share his must-see movies, what we can expect from Pedro Almodovar's new film, Julieta, and why there's such an absence of US-born Hispanic directors in cinema today. An advertising week has hit New York City, and I decided to speak with one of the great minds in multicultural marketing, Ong.the, the CEO and founder of TruthCo, about the future of Hispanic television. What language will it be in? What kind of programming will be on it? That and a recap of all the best pop culture stories that you might have missed this week. You've seen my first guest in dozens of TV shows such as Dexter, HBO's Oz, and on the big screen in films such as the remake of Annie and The Expendables. Puerto Rican David Zayas is an actor known for his professionalism and intense commitment to his roles. He now co-stars in the ensemble film The Lennon Report, seen through the eyes of those who lived the assassination of John Lennon. David joins me now on the podcast.
Hey, Jack. How you doing, man?
David, how are you, man?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
Let's talk a little bit about The Lennon Report. It's very interesting. Like, the perspective on this John Lennon assassination reminds me about a movie that I saw recently also about the JFK assassination, because it's done from different angles, I believe. Tell me a little bit about what the film is and your involvement in the film with your character.
It is similar, but here's the difference. In that movie, which I think is called Parkland, right? It's the one you're talking about?
That's the one.
Right, which I love that film. You know, the difference with this is the experience of blue-collar workers, doctors in the Roosevelt Hospital, that didn't know who was coming in, that didn't know what they were expecting, and how that materialized as, John Lennon came in when he was shot, and the transition of the sensationalism of it when they find out who he was, and the reaction of everybody, and how they had to handle these blue-collar workers, these nurses, these doctors, these security people, how they handled this event as it unfolded.
Now, you play a cop, correct, or a detective?
I play the head of security of Roosevelt Hospital.
And what role did he have in real life, and what did you bring to the role?
Well, here's the thing. For the sake of the film, I believe that they took a variety number of security people and they made it into this one character. And
okay.
That's what that's what this character is representing.
Now, let me ask you something, David. Where were you?
I was 18.
Okay.
I was 18. I was in New York City. I lived in the Bronx. You got to understand that in 1980, we have no internet. We have no cell phone. We have no beepers.
That's right.
It was simply what you saw, what you read in the newspaper, what you saw in, like, if you're in Times Square, what you see up in the screen, or what you saw on Channel 7 Eyewitness News with Roger Grimsley and Bill Butel. The news wasn't as immediate as it would be today. So when that news consumed all of the newscasts on TV, and in the newspaper the next day, in some weird way, it becomes even more significant.
Right.
It becomes even a bigger deal in 1980, because it kind of just saturates every media outlet. And at that time, there weren't that many as there are today. John Lennon, even though we all knew who John Lennon was, that really wasn't the music I grew up to, but it was still a significant, what it did was, it made me listen to a lot of John Lennon music.
Right? That happened to me too.
So,
I started listening to the Beatles as a whole.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to understand why the impact reverberated worldwide. And I'm like, am I missing something?
Well, what I did know at 18 at that time was that John Lennon was he was an outspoken activist. I was more familiar with John Lennon after the Beatles broke up.
Changing gears quickly, you're like the ultimate character actor. I was wondering if you've ever wanted to become a lead actor. I spoke to Michael Pena about this years ago because I think Michael Pena, John Ortiz, I spoke to this about this too, where they've solidified their credibility, their credentials in Hollywood, in film and television as a character actor. Has that ever crept into your head, and have you gone about it?
No. To me, it was very simple to me. Try to act any way, anyhow, any place you can, And so any opportunity to act to me was a welcome. It's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a character. It really doesn't matter to me if it's a lead or it's supporting. It really doesn't. It never has, and it probably never will.
You have an impressive resume, David. I mean, I've looked everything from top to bottom. You've been on some big shows, man, big movies as well. When did it hit you that this was your new normal?
The way I look at it is I'm an actor who hopefully has a good reputation, has a good work ethic, is a great collaborator, and loves what he does. I'm excited and surprised with every job I get. And I really do my research and take it very seriously and do the best work I can. I always wanted to be an actor since I saw Dog Day Afternoon when I was like 12 years old. I was like, I don't know what I want to do, whether it's act, but I know I want to be a part of how this movie is making me feel. It wasn't until like I was 29, 30 years old that I said, I'm going to try doing this. And I know that if I'm going to succeed in this, if there's going to be any success, I'm going to have to commit to it. And so I went to school and acting school. I joined the Labyrinth Theater Company with John Ortiz and just tried to, with humility and with passion and what I learned in life in my early years, and just try to do the best I can.
When you look at television and film, a lot of people are saying that we're now going through the golden age of television. But you as an actor who traverses between both mediums seamlessly, do you buy into that TV right now is better than film?
I think we are in the golden age of television. I think short-term television, particularly, network shows and on Showtime, HBO, Hulu, FX, those some of the best writing is happening in that medium. And so, yeah, I would agree that, and of course, independent film will always be there, and good films are always going to be around, but we are in the golden age of television. Television provides some of the best roles, I think, for an actor.
I wanted to get your thoughts on, from the moment you started into this business where there was a lack of Hispanic talent in directing, in screenwriting, in musical composition, cinematography, acting. When you saw Alfonso Cuarón, Alejandro González Iñárritu win Best Directors and Best Pictures, what was going on through your head? Were you going, holy sweat, my culture, my community, we've made it? Or is it normal to you?
It's great. There's more opportunity. I think there's a long way to go. It's a long way to go in creating our stories. My culture, trying to create that. And you do that by having directors, writers, producers that are going to promote telling these stories from different cultures, not only Latino, but, Asian American, African American. We're in a country that's, our art should represent our culture. Our art should represent our society.
What kind of stories do you think the Hispanic filmmakers, Hispanic screenwriters, Hispanic talent should be talking about? Because I had this conversation recently with Anthony Mendez, the narrator for Jane the Virgin, and we were talking about Latino stories, how it's always about immigration, it's always about crossing the border, it's always about something that reflects us in not necessarily the right light. What kind of stories do you want to hear from our community?
I love family stories that tell, a tale about the struggles within a family. Stories about family, stories about choices, stories about dealing with the environment that they're in. stories about them adjusting to new places that they're in, stories about the strength, the courage that they demonstrate. And there's a lot of that. I see it every day. I remember seeing it as a police officer every day. Family is so important. And so any story like that, this wonderful program that I've been watching just 2 weeks called This Is Us.
Oh, the one on NBC. I've been hearing great reviews on it.
What a beautiful story. And that story is about family. The story is about the struggles within the family. It's interesting to me. And these are the kind of stories that I would love to see, in every aspect of show business, in every aspect of television, of film. I always find that interesting.
Before I let you go, I wanted to do a quick speed round with you. Just throw a couple of questions at you and kind of get to know you a little bit better personally.
Sure.
Let's start. Favorite late night show?
Steve Colbert.
App that you can't live without?
I would say sports like ESPN and also CNN, maybe. Just some news programs. But I'm not a big app person.
Funniest person you've ever met?
Funniest person I've ever met. I would say my dad was the funniest person I've ever known.
A movie that changed your life?
Dog Day Afternoon. I thought that was fascinating.
An album you'd recommend to everyone?
Wow. I would say every Nina Simone album.
Nice.
But I joined the Air Force, and I remember there was this young girl from North Carolina who was also in the Air Force with me, and she used to listen to Nina Simone all the time, and I'm like, who is that? And she says, Nina Simone, and then I started listening to it, and I was fascinated.
Well, David, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you so much, brother.
Catch David Zayas on the big screen in The Lennon Report, premiering October 7th in a limited theatrical release. It's time for Jacked In, where we plug ourselves in to recap the most highly relevant bicultural pop culture news that happened this week. Let's begin with the top movie news of the week. There's a Lion King live-action remake coming soon. Remember the Hot Wheels toys? Well, that's going to become a movie directed by Justin Lin. DC Comics announced that Wonder Woman is gay. So now the question is, will she be gay in the movie? And Alejandro González Iñárritu plans to do an experimental short virtual reality film centered on a group of immigrants. Good luck. Changing over to the small screen, CBS's Sunday Morning makes it official and hires Jane Pauley to replace Charles Osgood. Saturday Night Live casts Alec Baldwin as its new Donald Trump, and Lin-Manuel Miranda will be hosting SNL on October 8th. FX cancels Guillermo del Toro's The Strain. BET's 6-hour 3-night event of the New Edition story sets its premiere date for January 24th to the 26th of 2017. And Will and Grace reunited for an election web episode, but still no word on whether that comeback will be permanent. Switching to music. It's official. Lady Gaga will be headlining the 2017 Super Bowl halftime show. Colombian singer Fonseca wrote and recorded a verse in Spanish for a new version of Ringo Starr's peace anthem, Now the Time Has Come. Jennifer Lopez will judge a new NBC dance competition series. One Direction's Niall Horan surprises with his first solo single called This Town. And Univision is in search for the next female regional Mexican star in a new music competition called La Reina de la Canción, premiering 2017. The biggest news to come out of the tech and social media industries is that Disney is looking to buy Twitter for what could be $20 billion. Spotify starts streaming into Japan. Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr just launched their own voter registration day campaign. And Snapchat is now called Snap Inc., and it launched a pair of techie sunglasses called Spectacles that would let users change how they film and post snap clips. The cost will be $130, and it'll be out in time for the holidays. And we'll finish off with Broadway. Hamilton's Leslie Odom Jr.'s new holiday album, Simply Christmas, will be available in November. Lin-Manuel Miranda says the In the Heights movie will begin shooting this spring, and he won't be playing Usnavi. And Hamilton, Chicago began previews this week and will have its official opening October 19th. Are you going? Oh, and happy birthday shout-outs to Olivia Newton-John, who turns 68, and Gwyneth Paltrow, who turns 44. The 54th edition of the New York Film Festival is already underway here in New York City. I thought I should have a chat with Kent Jones, the director of the festival, to gather his views on what film gems we should expect this year in a discussion on Almodovar and the non-existence of the U.S. Hispanic director. You are the director of the New York Film Festival. I'd like to begin with this interview with a basic question. Why are film festivals so important to our communities and our cities, in your opinion?
Well, because at this point in film history, it's harder and harder for movies that are not franchises or superhero movies or sequels to be seen. And it's harder and harder for smaller distribution companies to operate. It's certainly easier to get a film seen on smaller screens at home, but that's different. And then you're getting away from a word that you just used, which is communities. So that's why there are more and more film festivals in the world, because they actually provide a forum for people to see a lot of movies that ordinarily would pass them by, or that would be available to them, but they might not know that they're available to them because, they have no way of knowing that they're there on Netflix or Hulu or, one of the many other platforms that they can have access to at home. So that's why film festivals are important.
You selected Ava DuVernay's 13th as the opening night film, 20th Century Women with Annette Bening. It's one of its stars as your centerpiece film, and The Lost City of Z as your closing night film. What do you think makes these particular films so special for you to select them in those categories?
Well, the simple answer is that they're all great. But that's not the answer that you're looking for. But they are. I mean, and the thing that's so, that I really love is that they're all so different. They're very, very different kinds of movies. The 13th, or as it's actually called 13th, there's no "the," is the first time we've ever opened to the documentary. It's a documentary that meets history head on and that is dealing with something that is in the shadows of what people talk about a lot. That's mass incarceration and the development of the prison industry.
1 out of 4 human beings with their hands on bars, shackled, in the world are locked up here in the land of the free.
20th Century Women is a very different kind of movie. It's a very, very personal movie about Mike Mills, the director's, adolescence. And I mean, for me, I found it extremely moving.
Stop.
What? Thinking that you know everything that's going on.
No, I don't. I just think that, having your heart broken is a tremendous way to learn about the world.
Annette Bening has always been a great actress, and she's just absolutely amazing.
And then finally, The Lost City of Z. It's a James Gray film, and he hasn't done many films in his career, but the few that he has done, I've just fallen in love with. Perhaps my favorite is Two Lovers with Joaquin Phoenix and Gwyneth Paltrow. I felt like it had I connected with it in a way that I rarely connect with films. What can we expect from Lost City of Z as your closing night selection?
James's movies are among the glories of American cinema. And he's a guy who knows, obviously, when you watch his movies, you can see he's a guy who knows his film history. And his films are connected with the history of film, in particular American film, in a very, very interesting way. Because he makes melodramas that are very much in the vein of, movies from an earlier era, but then he builds from that and builds his own very intensely personal. So in this one, for the very first time, he's making a movie, not New York. It's not only not New York, but it's not contemporary. It's literally a kind of movie that people don't make anymore in terms of the craftsmanship and the scale of it.
We may find a city bedecked with gold. It may well write a whole new chapter in human history.
Before I let you go, Ken, I noticed there are 3 Hispanic films as part of your slate. Hermia and Elena from Matias Piñeiro, Julieta from Pedro Almodovar, and Neruda, which I'm really looking forward to, from Pablo Larraín and Gael García Bernal.
Actually, we just announced yesterday we're doing a special screening of another movie by Pablo Larraín, which is called Jackie. It's about Jackie Kennedy.
Oh, that's right. That's the one with Natalie Portman.
Yeah. That's right. We're doing a Cuban film, a Cuban documentary by Olatz Garmendia called Patria o Muerte. So, we actually have a lot of them.
It's interesting because every time you mention a lot of these films, most of these films are from Argentina, Mexico, there's Cuba. But what you don't hear is the US-born Hispanic director in cinema today. Why do you think there's such an absence of them?
It's the same question when it comes to why are there so few women making films and why are there so few African American filmmakers? The answer we could all provide. We all know the answer. The answer is that, the majority of jobs, not just film director, but in a lot of professions, have been filled by, white men. This year, there are many more women filmmakers than there have been in the past. Now, I think we're in a position in the country where the opportunities are becoming more numerous.
Pedro Almodovar has Julieta
Yeah.
out this year. You're presenting it. The last two films he's done were hiccups. They weren't received with the same level of love as his previous films from the past.
Yeah.
Do you think Julieta puts him back on track?
Well, this is a different kind of movie. I mean, this is a passion project of his that he's been wanting to do for a long time. He had wanted to do it as an American movie with Meryl Streep for years because, it's actually based on stories by Alice Munro. I don't know why that fell apart, but it did. And so he decided that he was going to transpose it to a Spanish setting. And yeah, it's a really impassioned piece of work. I mean, we're proud to be showing it.
Kent, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate your insight, and I'm sure that you've already got me. I mean, I was already intrigued by your programming slate this year, but now talking to you, I'm really excited to see these other films that you've also mentioned. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
The New York Film Festival runs straight through October 16th at New York's Lincoln Center. If you're interested in going to the movies, here's what's in theaters.
Jake, right on time. Miss Peregrine, delighted to meet you.
My grandpa told me about this.
This is a home for peculiar children.
Mayday, mayday, this is Deepwater Horizon.
Come on, we gotta go!
My husband, Mike Williams, is on the Deepwater Horizon.
Everybody calm down.
What's wrong? Not now, baby. My wife's name is Felicia. And my daughter's Sydney. And I will see them again. Do you understand me?
What if we lose? Suddenly it becomes acceptable to say the Holocaust didn't happen?
The word denier is particularly evil. There are no holes in that roof. Therefore, there never were any gas chambers.
No holes, no Holocaust. He wanted a catchy phrase. He's got it.
Where's the evidence? Where's the proof?
Not all opinions are equal.
But I'm not a racist.
I've been defending my right to stand up against someone who wants to pervert the truth.
If it's TV you want to see and binge on, here's what I recommend.
I was put in some tank like an exotic fish. Came out with abilities.
Netflix premieres all 13 episodes of Marvel's second African-American hero, Luke Cage.
The whole neighborhood is yapping about how 2 goons got the beat down last night.
I heard it was 4 guys.
Saturday Night Live begins a new season with host Margot Robbie and The Weeknd performing. It'll also be the debut of Melissa Villaseñor, the first SNL Latina cast member, racist tweets and all. And Nate Parker will be appearing on CBS's 60 Minutes on Sunday to speak with Anderson Cooper on his film Birth of a Nation and his rape allegations. Take a listen.
Do you feel guilty about anything that happened that night?
I don't feel guilty.
Do you feel you did something morally wrong?
As a Christian man, just being in that situation, yeah, sure.
I used to work in Spanish language television for almost a decade, and now most of the work I do is in English. I'm what you call an example of the bilingual story which so many Hispanic Americans in this country reflect. They speak, listen, watch, read, write, and communicate in 2 languages. Having worked in media bilingually, I often wonder, what is the future of Spanish in media? Is Spanish the future of content in America, or a language left for an older generation like my grandparents? To answer these questions, I welcome Linda Ong to the show. She's the CEO and founder of TruthCo, an omnicultural branding and insights firm, and has been at the center of some of the most high-profile brand transformations in media, including the brand portfolio of Univision. Hi, Linda. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jack. Glad to be here.
Before we begin, I wanted to ask you this. How does your cultural background prepare you to become an Hispanic expert?
Well, that's a great story that goes really way back to about, 50 years ago when I was a little kid growing up. And I grew up in a household that was of Chinese descent. My parents were born in Indonesia. They went to Dutch schools because Indonesia was a Dutch colony at the time. They went to university in Europe. They moved to the States. They lived in California. I was born in New York. When I was 8 years old, I moved to Texas. I think I had to deal with a lot of cultures growing up. And for me, I was always an outsider. And so for me, growing up in Texas, aside from the fact that my best friend for 12 years was a Cubana, I think that the Hispanic affinity for me was really just an affinity for people who were not of the mainstream. And I find that oddly enough, I worked with African Americans, worked with Hispanics, never worked with solely on an Asian brand. But I think I always feel that I understand the perspective of not being, a white, centuries old family, and coming at things from more of a perspective of somebody who's trying to understand what it means to fit in, what cultural codes and cues allow someone to be quote unquote cool or an insider. And so studying all those things and just translating them to different audiences and different kinds of cultures, just came natural to me.
The Hispanic market for me has always been this incredible immigrant story. It's almost like the outlier immigrant story. It's less about assimilation, more about cultural infiltration. We see Latino cultural imprints on everything today: food, music, dance, fashion, entertainment, and now where we really are seeing it is in TV and film. A great example is Queen of the South, season 2 on USA, and El Señor de los Cielos on Telemundo. It's #1 with millennials, regardless of language. How do you explain this? What kind of Hispanic is dictating the dominance right now? Is it the Spanish dominance or is it the English dominant Latinos?
That's a great question. From our perspective, we've been studying the Hispanic market in the U.S. since 2008, and we really see it as 2008 as being the perfect storm of a couple of different factors. One, you had, of course, the rapid growth of Hispanics in the U.S., fueled very much by a bicultural second and third generation. It's interesting when I talk to people who are not in the Hispanic space about the Hispanic space, I say all the growth that's projected, by 2050, 40% of the U.S. is going to be Hispanic, is not coming from immigrants. It's coming from people having babies. And I think people don't understand that so much of the growth is organic in the U.S. And that's a really exciting time because you have people that don't really have a strong association other than emotional with other countries, and yet they have a very, very fierce and embedded sense of tradition and heritage. You couple that with the economic collapse, and then the third component in this perfect storm would be the rise of millennials, as you said, just as a population, a generation that has been raised on social justice values like fairness. I mean, they literally all got trophies, so they expect everyone's going to be treated equally. Much more of a curiosity and openness to other cultures. And you also have, millennials are the smartest, most intelligent, most educated generation on earth. And then lastly, of course, in the perfect storm, the fuel, the accelerant to all of this was social and digital. And, we know that every study shows that Latinos over-index on social and digital, especially mobile platforms. To me, it's just a great confluence of a lot of wonderful factors coming together. And, what Latino tastes are cool now. Latino tastes are driving pop culture and food. Mexican and Latino food is becoming the new hot cuisine. And it just goes to show that people are really, really open to good ideas when they're presented in a way that is good for everybody.
I'm doing the math here, and it's very clear that there is a very clear distinction between Spanish language dominance and the new English language dominant Hispanics that I just feel like in the last 2 years came out of nowhere. What ultimately is going to be the engine that pushes Hispanic growth in this country?
Well, it's interesting because I work with so many clients who are not familiar with the Hispanic space, and the first thing they ask me is about language. And language used to be a great definer and divider, and language is just another communication tool, but it's not a hard line, especially when it comes to biculturals. And I think what you see in the U.S. is really interesting because for so many decades it's been dominated by Mexican, actual Mexican product that was brought in by mostly by Univision and Televisa, and mostly on Univision. And that really, because of the populations, veering so heavily towards Mexican Americans, I believe it's something like 75% of the U.S. Hispanic population is Mexican, that, it became a very monolithic view of Spanish language television. And you had Telemundo, who was showing things like, Colombian, Venezuelan, Argentinian soap operas. And, in the beginning that seemed like an also-ran, but now it's just become more and more diverse. And I think what's happening in Hispanic language television or Spanish language television is the same that's happening in English language television, which is there's an explosion, a fire hose of choices. And nobody wants to be defined by one category or one genre. Consumers don't watch things in genres, just like they don't watch things in language. They just watch content. And content can be any mix of anything that people find interesting. I mean, you take a show like Jane the Virgin on the CW, which does a really good job of mixing English and Spanish language tropes and comments and codes, but they don't do it in a way that's anything but just organic to the story and the characters. And I think that, we see more and more shows. I spent the entire weekend just binge viewing Narcos.
Right. I think everyone has.
90%, yeah, and like 90% of that show's in subtitles. Now, here's another thing. It used to be, and I grew up in traditional television, used to be growing up, I was told Americans will never read subtitles. That was just told. We were not a literate nation. But my team has observed over the last 8 years an explosion not only in the use of subtitles, but the ability for everyday viewers to just be very, nonchalant about watching them, mostly because of reality television, where you had English to English subtitles. Because in unscripted television, you had people who were drunk, where they were, speaking in some kind of jargon or accent that you couldn't understand, or they were going to the bathroom and they were behind closed doors and it was fuzzy. But you cannot watch a reality TV show without subtitles now. I think, again, all these markers that used to divide us are just going to become texture. And something like Univision, with their very aggressive purchase on the digital end of going into English language, I think what they're doing is just mirroring the reality of their audience. It's smart.
Netflix, they keep on offering Hispanic, bicultural, bilingual, Spanish programming from Narcos to El Gran Hotel to Velvet. Clearly, they are getting Hispanics and multiculturals.
Yeah.
What other company approaches even to the same level of ideas and forward thinking as they are right now?
Telemundo is doing with NBC Universo, which is owned by Comcast, and it's essentially their cable answer to Telemundo and a way to go up against Galavision. They're doing some really smart things in that they're bringing high quality content like The Walking Dead and dubbing it in Spanish, but not doing sort of a half-assed job the way a lot of Spanish language dubbing is done, but doing really a production, putting a production effort and production value into the dubbing that is appropriate for a high quality peak television show like The Walking Dead. And I think just understanding there's an opportunity for Spanish dominant viewers to appreciate high quality television. I mean, high quality Spanish language television has not existed in the U.S. to date before things like Narcos. And Narcos season 2 is a co-production with Univision. But increasingly, the bulk of Hispanic television in the U.S. is going to, again, because of just so much choice, is going to be more demanding, more discerning, just as it is in mainstream general market television.
It's 5-10 years from now. What is the future of our Hispanic language or our Hispanic media landscape?
For so long, the only representation that was really anything anybody paid attention to of African American life was what we call the ratchet shows on, like VH1, Love and Hip Hop, Flavor of Love, things that were really for an African American audience, very comical and fun to laugh at, but not a representation of how the bulk of that audience lived their lives. And now, if you look at just the diversity among the way African Americans are portrayed on television. You have the ratchet shows, but you also have Empire. You've got Fox coming out with a couple of really amazing African-American leads. There's a lot of stuff going on at Fox that is really boding well for showing a great diversity of types of African-Americans. Then you've got BET and you've got TV One and, a lot of other representations. So I think the same thing is starting to perhaps happen with Hispanic American television, at least in how they're portrayed. And that's really what we're seeing, is that there's no ambassadors for a stereotype anymore, right? There's no one way to be Latina. In fact, there's a big debate right now going on in the ad industry. Like beauty ads tend to depict light-skinned Latinas over darker.
Oh well, listen, that's been a problem that I've witnessed.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I would say I'm dark-skinned, but you don't see dark-skinned people reflected in Spanish language novellas.
Or Blactinos. I believe I heard a statistic, a third of the Hispanic population has African descent.
No, yeah, and it's always swept under the rug every time it's brought up.
So, these things are the opportunities over the next 5 to 10 years. What is the story of a Blactino that is not just sort of supposed to represent a singular experience, but is an individual's point of view, right? What is the point of view of an Asian Latino? What is the point of view of a gay Latino? There's many, many, many different shades that can be portrayed within this very, very large and diverse group. We like to say the internet, in terms of content, is like a fire hose. And if you think of every molecule of water as being a different point of view, that's the opportunity 5 to 10 years from now, is to show all the diversity within the space. And yet what really unifies the audience, sense of heritage or values or history or whatever, but also invites other people into the party. And that's one thing that we really are looking at these days, is looking at the fourth wave of diversity, which we call and is called omniculturalism, where now today, especially in entertainment, multiculturalism is table stakes. You can't cast a show without having you can't cast The Bachelor without having an Asian woman, a Latino woman, a black woman, etc. The problem is they still all look like Barbie, right?
Right, and not like real people.
No, they're not, and they're all they all wear in the same. They could all interchange their dresses and all that. And I think will be really revolutionary when somebody actually understands that that's just one kind of dating show. But then there are actually many other types of women who are eligible bachelorettes or eligible candidates for relationships that aren't cast through a Hollywood eye. And so the omnicultural view looks at every person as an individual, and it's just an ecosystem. And and every different person is defined by an intersection of different qualities. So there's you take, of course, there's racial diversity, but then there's sexual identity, there's gender, there's politics, there's faith,
so fragmented.
There's it's so fragmented. It's the academic term is intersectionality, is that we are all identified by our intersections. And each intersection can be, a subculture, right? So there's an opportunity to move away. There's cultural pressure to move away from just saying, like, I'm an Asian woman to I'm a straight Asian mother, divorced with, living in the entertainment business. I mean, there's so many different places that I intersect, and I don't have to be defined by any one of those. It's the sum total. And so that is a POV, this omnicultural view, is this intersectionality creates individuals that are each very, very one of a kind, and trying to figure out the common sensibilities and psychographics that you can pull to or market to. But essentially, they essentially also come down to what we all share as human values. That's it.
She is Linda Ong, the CEO and founder of TruthCo. Thank you for joining the podcast, Linda.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for this 8th episode of Highly Relevant. I want to thank David Zayas, Kent Jones, and Linda Ong for coming on the podcast, and I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any suggestions on how I can improve the show, please email me at highlyrelevant@showbizcafe.com. That's highlyrelevant@showbizcafe.com. Also, if you like the podcast, share it and tell your friends to please subscribe. It makes a major difference in reaching a wider audience. We're also now on Spotify, Google Play, and Stitcher for you Android users. See you again next Friday on another episode of Highly Relevant.
Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform is making it easier than ever to support Black-owned brands. When you go to walmart.com/Black and Unlimited, you'll not only get to shop products from Black-owned brands, but also learn about founders like Janelle Stevens of Camille Rose, which specializes in products for naturally curly hair. And there are many more awesome products that you have yet to discover. It's all easy to find with Walmart's Black and Unlimited platform. Join in on celebrating Black brands today and every day at Walmart. We are Black and Unlimited. Visit walmart.com/Black and Unlimited to discover more. That's walmart.com/Black and Unlimited.